Welcome back to Close Up. For years, New Hampshire's 1st congressional district has been known as a swing district, switching between parties 5 times in 10 years. But Representative Chris Pappas could be quietly changing that narrative. He's in his 3rd term now and is expected to run again. He will have challengers, and the first one to step forward is Russell Prescott, the longtime state senator and executive counselor who joins us in studio this morning. Thanks for being here, Senator.
Thank you. It's a great honor.
So you started this same race 2 years ago, a little bit late, and you obviously didn't succeed in the primary.
Yes.
How do you break through this time around?
Well, certainly from starting early. Again, I want to say thanks for letting me be here. It's really an honor. Starting early allows me to contact all the people that I know and gather their endorsements. And prior to even signing up for office, I raised $100,000 just to make sure that people were for me, wanted me to run. I also made sure I talked to the other contestants in the race and made sure I had their okay to run again, and made sure that happened. And with all of that happening, I signed up for office a month and a half ago. I've raised $400,000 and want to just continue to get more and more endorsements. And the spectrum of endorsements has come from Al Baldessaro all the way over to Stella and Doug Scammon. So I'm so pleased with the response I've had. Starting early, I think, is most important to coalesce, try and get somebody that has some experience, some ability to win in tough races, and that's me. So I'm bringing that message out there to try and bring the Republican Party together to win in the primary, because that's the first hurdle you have to make, and then to have those endorsements from the right and from the left of the party really is encouraging. That's why I'm so excited about starting early is the most important point.
Now, Republicans expected to win this district in 2022, and they didn't. Why was that?
I believe that my candidacy is about, experience. My experience started out with being in business, and that's going to help win this election. In business, raised a small family business from 10 employees to 55 employees. I know the importance of employment and people having great employees. I remember in high school, my dad comes home, he started the business in 1954. He comes home, I'm in high school, he says, I just afforded health insurance for every one of my employees. The grand point of his career running his business. I've maintained that because I know how much it is important to have good health care and having a good thriving company able to support that. I worked hard and made sure I was able to give good benefits, and I carried that over to public service. Public service to me is running for office and serving in Concord, and I did that for 5 terms in the state senate, and I carried those same ideals. People are important. Make sure you take care of people. Constituent service is important, just like in my business, customer service.
Yeah, so you think resume will make a big difference, but
yes.
Chris Pappas is becoming one of those kinds of politicians who doesn't lose elections. It's looking like he's pretty much set, and it's hard to defeat somebody like that. What is the case that you are going to make specifically that voters should change to someone else?
Yes, unfortunately, he has turned his back on the ideals of public service in New Hampshire. That is balanced budgets, making sure that people have more control over their lives, local control. He is having a top-down approach to being in Congress. He is thinking that all the decisions should be made in Washington, D.C., more than they should be made here in a local level. And you can point to the recent approach of the Supreme Court to give more control to the states when it comes to the abortion issue, whereas that is bringing more power to the people to decide for themselves what that issue is going to be like. Here in New Hampshire, Chris Pappas is saying, no, I'll decide for you what that is. And that's not fair, and that's not good for people here in New Hampshire. Turning your back on balanced budgets, turning your back on states' rights is not a good recipe for a re-election, and that's why I'm running.
You mentioned the abortion issue, obviously in your own party, and you staked out this position in the last cycle, saying that you believe it's a states' rights issue and it shouldn't be decided in Washington. But there are some presidential candidates in your party saying this should be decided in Washington and there should be restrictions at the federal level. If you're swept into office with a new Republican president in 2024, are you really going to be standing against your own party on the issue? You're pro-life as well, so are you really going to be standing against against them if they say we need to put some abortion restrictions in place?
I think I'll be standing with the Constitution. I think that's where I have the advantage of running for office many, many times. 7 times I swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. And that's what is needed to win in November. Someone with experience, someone that carries through with their word, that is trustworthy. And that started with me as a young age, you know, with my honoring my parents' good wisdom, asking my to today's wife, my girlfriend Susan, to partner with me. We've been married for 41 years. That's trustworthiness. I trust her, she trusts me. We work together, 5 kids, raising 5 kids, and that takes a lot of learning on the job as well as being just a good role model. And that's what I'm running for office. You know, I show all that in my business life. I show it in my time in the Senate and the Executive Council, to be one that's more for the people, understanding the Constitution and making sure I do the right thing, make those decisions slowly so that they are correct as much as possible.
Yeah, and you were known for watching The Bottom Line there in Concord. In Congress right now, at the end of the month, the government will shut down if they can't reach another one of these temporary agreements on spending. If you get elected, are you going to be participating in this fiscal brinksmanship or fighting against it?
I would fight against it. I'd say that those decisions were made in prior times in Congress. We need to honor that, or when you end up with a shutdown, that's not the right way to approach it. I would say from the point that I get there to the point where, you know, trying to reduce the budget deficit, reduce our dependency on foreign people buying our debt, that's most important for the future. We have to concentrate on that, and not this brinksmanship. I don't agree with it. I would rather just say, let's get that off the table, raise the debt limit. That's somebody else's responsibility of endorsing that, and that would be Chris Pappas. Yes, it's going to be a problem. It's going to increase inflation. Yes, that's what he did. But I would not take part in that. But I'm not going to shut down government to make a point. The point that has to be made is that Chris Pappas is not thinking of the bottom line, is not thinking of our future generations that are going to have to pay this huge bill. I've read that the budget deficit, just in the annual budget deficit, is going to double because of what Chris Pappas had done. From the top down, from Joe Biden down to the very lowest in Congress, which is Chris Pappas, it's lockstep to do the wrong thing in that situation.
If elected, will you be voting in favor of more aid to Ukraine?
I will not immediately be doing that. I believe that the problem we have is we're ignoring the needs we have at home. While the Inflation Reduction Act included bailing out of a private pension fund, and we're ignoring the fact that Social Security is going to be going bankrupt soon, that's Chris Pappas's idea, not mine. I need to make sure we don't spend money elsewhere when the greatest needs are at home. I have full compassion for someone fighting in their backyard, but we still have to worry about our backyard. So we have to do what you might say, don't leave the other undone, but we must do what we need to do at home first, and then talk about aid after we cut some expenses here, be able to lower the amount of deficit we have every single year, and make sure we do that first.
Speaking of issues at home, #1 issue for New Hampshire voters right now is housing and the astronomical cost thereof. So what role does the federal government have, if any, in your opinion, as a conservative, in trying to make housing cheaper?
Yes. I think a role would be getting our rating for our ability to borrow money at a lower interest rate. That's important, because what happens is when you don't balance the budget and the interest rates are increasing, is the banks are downgrading the United States, and we have a spiral of more and more increase in our national debt. I think that is lowering our value of our dollar and causing more expense in gasoline these days. It's also starting to increase. Those increases around us, doubling our cost of going out to eat. You go out for breakfast, it's $15. You go out for getting your groceries, that's doubled. If we can get that under control, then housing is more affordable, and that's what I would say, that is the right thing to do.
Obviously, those interest rates are pretty painful right now. So,
Yes.
Councillor Prescott, thanks for joining us on Close Up. We'll catch you out there on the campaign trail.
Thank you so much.